indeed a very special day. It is the 24th of Teves. Chavdal Tevet is the Yom Hilula of the Baal haTanya. He passed away 210 years ago in the year Taf Kuf Ayin Gimel. We are now in Tafshin Pei Gimel. That's 210 years exactly. So let's utilize the opportunity and study a little bit of his ideas and his teachings, as we do most of the time. And I want to start with a little story. The story was, the Baal haTanya had many Hasidim. Many of them were deep, introspective, real, serious, Ovdei Hashem. Now, the definition of Oved Hashem is someone who gets in touch with their own self, their own emotions, and is able to work it. To work on their emotions, to get themselves to a space of being aligned with Hashem. It's very difficult work, it's challenging, it's hard, and his teachings are designed to enable a person to daven from not asking Hashem to do the hard work, but partnering with Hashem in doing the hard work, which means allowing Hashem's presence into your own life. So there's a lot. He taught, he was called Shnei Or, two lights. Yep. Two lights, because he wrote Tanya and all the Ma'amarim that he put together, which is the Hasidic side of things. He also had a massive contribution in the revealed element of Torah, which is he wrote a Shulchan Aruch Harav, and many responsa that he wrote. So he had both lights. The lights of the dimension of revealed of Torah and the hidden part of Torah. That's the two lights. But not all his Hasidim were necessarily such people. In fact, some people were more on the intellectual side of things. Now, the movement of intellectualism is generally called the Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment. Among the Hasidim, there was a term used for a Chassid who is really just like more of an intellectual type of Chassid, which means he doesn't internalize us. To be contrasted with an Oved. An Oved is someone who works on his midot, his internal. A maskil is more like an intellectual chassid. He gets the ideas, he loves the ideas, but doesn't work them into his life. So one such of the Hasidim was a very intellectual personality. His name was Shlomo Fagin. And this guy was a chassid of the Baal haTanya. One day he was going on a business trip to Leipzig. That was the market. That's where the shows took place, right? Like you're going to the trade show in Las Vegas. Today there's a lot of shows everywhere. Leipzig was the place to go, where the market was happening.
Is that in Poland? Germany. Leipzig.
Yep. Leipzig was like the center. Anyhow, he comes into the Rebbe to ask for a blessing as he's about to go. And he asked him, what's your itinerary? How are you traveling there? So he told him. He says, look, on the way, I want you to take a little detour and stop off in a place called Karlin. Over there, I have a good friend. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Karlin, the Karliner Rebbe. Now, the first Karliner Rebbe was Reb Aaron Karlin. Reb Shlomo Karlin was his student and successor. And he was very friendly with the Baal haTanya, a lot of good stories between them. So he sent him to the Karliner Rebbe. Guy goes to the Karliner and he asks for an audience and he wants to send regards from the Baal haTanya. So the Karliner is in his room and this guy was told, go sit outside the room and wait in the waiting room. So he's sitting and waiting. The Karliner is pacing up and down, and he hears this pacing, up, down, up, down. He's the only guy sitting in the room outside, and the Rebbe's in the room inside, and he's waiting. And he's waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. A lot of time passes by. Then suddenly the door flies open, and he sees the Karliner Rebbe standing over there, so he's startled and he jumps up. And the Karliner doesn't see him or so it appears. He just stares into midair. And he says, in Yiddish, he says, Junger Mann, Efscher ist fort, do a Gott oifen Welt. Avrech, young man. Maybe there's a God in the world. And then he steps back, goes right back into his room, closes the door, and paces up and down again. And the guy's like, all right. Sits down, waiting. Another long wait, pacing inside, and the door flies open. And he jumps up again. And the Rebbe's standing at the door, and the same words. Junger Mann, Efscher ist fort, do a Gott oifen Welt. A little more forceful than the previous time. And he's wondering, is he talking to me? Young man, maybe there is a God in the world. And he goes right back in. And the scenario repeats itself a third time. And the Karlina comes out after pacing, and this time screaming, Junger Mann, Efscher ist fort, do a Gott oifen Welt. Young man, maybe there is a God in the world. And the Karlina goes back, and then he gets the message. That was the audience. That was the Yechidus. That's what you meant. Okay. So, whatever that means, not sure. Didn't understand what it meant. So he leaves. Goes, does his things, goes to Leipzig, comes back. Didn't take too long. And the guy decided that this whole Hasidic system is not for him. It's not his cup of tea. He's out. So he leaves. And he goes to other pastures. And he checks out other things, and he loses his Judaism. He drops it all. And he actually is a very smart, intelligent man and Jewish. So he rises up and he starts to understand where the power is. So he becomes a very powerful person in the Tsarist government. And years pass by. And after a few years, there's a meeting that takes place. And there's a decision made, a government decision made, that is to have a road built. Now by that time, the Baal haTanya had passed away. And he was buried in a cemetery. When he passed away, he had to run away from his hometown because he was fleeing Napoleon, the advancing armies of Napoleon. So he ran away and he fled. And he found himself, he passed away in a very small village called Piena, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Now how many people do you think were present at the Baal haTanya's funeral? You would think a well-attended funeral. What? At his funeral, there was no minyan. There were 2 people present. 2 people went and buried him in a small village called Hadich. And that was because nowadays we understand these things, in funerals, having small funerals and all that. It was a time of war, and there was also all sorts of plagues around there, so you had to bury the person wherever they died. There was no Jewish cemetery in Vienna. So they wanted to take him to Hadich without anybody knowing, to a Jewish cemetery, so it was done stealthily in the middle of the night, and he was just buried, and So that's Hadich, it's the middle of nowhere. So now the government's making a decision, after he passed away, that they want to build a road. And the road is going to go right straight through the Jewish cemetery of Hadich, which means it's going to go over the grave. So you've got to move the grave, you've got to do what you've got to do. And the Hasidim are distraught, because you can't do that. So they find out who's in charge of this committee of the government. And what do they discover? The fellow in charge has a Yiddish name in his original source. His name is Shlomo Fagin. So they dispatch one of Shlomo Fagin's former good friends, a tremendous chassid of the Baal haTanya originally, whose name was Reb Moshe Vilenker. And they said to Reb Moshe Vilenker, you go over and you chat with this guy. Goes over, takes a trip, meets this fellow, and he says to him, Shlomo, they're building this road, and the road's being built over the cemetery of your Rebbe. Like it or not, your Rebbe. So he says, not to worry, I have the power. Done. But I have one condition before I make sure this decree gets annulled. He says, the condition is, I'm a chassid at heart. Hasidim like Fabrengens. So I wanted Fabrengen. So Moshe Vilenka was there with a couple other friends, and he says, if you come to me tonight, promise me to come tonight to Fabrengen. In my house, we'll make a Fabrengen, and then afterwards, no problem, no issue, don't worry, done. That's a good deal. They come to the Fabrengen, and they're sitting down. Very interesting, Fabrengen, because the guy looks like an absolute, Russian Gentile. Does not look Jewish in the slightest bit. And they look at him, and they're like, okay, what are we Fabrengen about? In the middle of the Fabrengen, when he is in that real space of teshuvah, of feeling Hashem's presence, he tells them, he says, I want to tell you my biggest problem, the travesty that was done to me. He says, that I'm not getting Olam Haba, the world to come. I got that memo. I get it. But at the very least, I want to enjoy my Olam Hazeh. I want to enjoy this world. I'm a powerful guy. I'm wealthy. Good family. Non-Jewish wife. But I'm enjoying everything of this world. I love it. And every time I try to enjoy myself in this world, every time I'm about it, like I'm just getting into this pleasure of Olam Hazeh, of this world, what happens? A little voice comes screaming at me and says, Junger Mann, Efscher ist fort, da Gott oifen Welt. Young man, maybe there's a God in the world. Maybe you're living life and it's awesome and incredible. Maybe they were right. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this. And he says, and what bothers me is that I can't enjoy anything. Every time I'm about to enjoy it. Those words that the Baal haTanya sent me to Rav Shlomo Karliner, and he's staring out in midair and saying, I have a doubt for you. Maybe everything is incorrect. And because of that, I'll never forgive him. Because I'm never able to enjoy myself and derive pleasure from this world. So I was thinking about that story. And every story that's told to us is for us to live off. We talk a lot about emunah. Emunah in Hashem. About connection to God. The question which we need to ask ourselves is, you have a problem? You don't believe in Hashem? Of course I believe in Hashem. What do you mean? One God. I think everybody here is okay with emunah, belief in Hashem. But ask yourself the question, do I really believe? That means when I'm in the thick of things, in the middle of a day, am I a believer? Am I living with emunah in Hashem? Or is it a good theory and not practice? I believe in Hashem Echad, yes. And then I come home and, I have an argument with someone in the family, with a spouse, with a child, a parent, with someone in the family. I have an argument. So I have a child, and the child's not keeping Shabbos. And I'm upset. So what do? Start screaming at the child. And I get angry at them. Keep Shabbos. You can't not keep Shabbos. In my house, you have to keep Shabbos. And what am I doing in that? Doesn't it say, that if you're angry, it's idol worship? Simple, I'm not angry. I'm just angry because they're not keeping Shabbos. Is that true? Isn't it true that I'm really angry because I'm upset that my family is not working out the way I wanted it to work out? Do you see the lack of emunah at that point? Living emunah means that every step of my life is aligned with Hashem, aligned with the divine. So when I fall into a space and there's an argument going on and there's an upsetness and there's lack of clarity, every step of the way I'm able to reposition myself, align myself straight with Hashem. The Gemara puts it as we've discussed before. It says, Gan ve'apum machtarta rachmana kakarya. A ganav, a thief, when he's about to steal, he's entering into the machteret. Machteret is the underground. He's about to go steal. What does he do? He's a Yiddish Ganav. He's a Jewish thief. So he utters a silent prayer. Hashem, help me in my business. Help me do what? Help me steal. And you're like, but why are you stealing? Well, I've got to make a parnasa. You've got to make a living somehow or another. So I'm stealing. That, the Baal haTanya says, is something we all struggle through. On some level, we're all that. We have emunah, we believe in Hashem, but when it comes to the realities of life, we're still stressed, still anxious, still worried, still sad, still have all these negative feelings. Emunah means that we learn how to translate Hashem's presence into the moment. Emunah is hard work. It's translating it so that you can feel the presence of Hashem in your life. And the trouble is that there's a little voice which all the time says to you inside, Junger Mann, Efshar ist fort da Gott auf der Welt. Maybe there's a God in the world. Maybe this is real. And our mission is to be able to allow the presence of Hashem into our lives so that we can live with this godly divine revelation, to live it, so we can actually experience the connection to Hashem on a daily basis. It is very hard work. So I take you back to a very, very, very pivotal moment in Jewish history. What happens is the Jews are at the time in exile in Mitzrayim, and things are terrible. They've been there for, at that point, 210 years. Same number as the Yahrzeit. They've been there for 210 years. Redu Shana. Redu is 210. The numerical value, the gematria. And it's harsh. And suddenly one day, Hashem appears in the middle of a desert to Moshe. And he appears in a burning bush, in a sneh. He sees the burning bush. It's burning, but it's not burning. And he's like, what's going on there? And he steps into this space. And as he does so, he has a discussion with the divine. And Hashem appears to him, first revelation. Hashem and Moshe having a conversation. And the strange part about it is that what Moshe is doing is, he's arguing with God. For 7 days, he argues with Hashem. And you wonder sometimes, come on, Hashem says go, why don't you go? Understand the nature of argument. The nature of argument means, I want to do what Hashem wants, I just don't know how to internalize it. He's not arguing, Hashem, you said go, no, I'm not going. He's like, you want me to go, okay, so I need to internalize what it means to be honest and really want to go. But I don't understand. I don't get it. There's questions that I have. So what's happening is Hashem is downloading emunah into Moshe. He's placing himself into Moshe, and the resistance of Moshe is my not getting how this operates. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. Moshe's lack of understanding is what we all go through. When Hashem wants to download himself into us, or we're trying to download him into us, and we're trying to build a connection, and it doesn't go. It's so hard. That's because the realities of life challenge our emunah. So let's delve into one of those challenges that Moshe presents. Moshe says to Hashem, listen God, so I'm going to come to them. And I'm going to say to the Jews, here I am. I'm coming to redeem you. And I'm going to say, Hashem Elokei Avotechem Shlachani Aleichem. Hashem, God of your fathers, sent me to you. What will they respond? Remember what he says? Ve'amru li, they will say, Ma shmo, what's his name? Ma omar aleim, what should I say? What's his name? So he says, Hashem says, good question. Tell them, Eke asher eke, I will be who I will be. Kotomar el bnei Yisrael, Eke shlachani alechem, and you can't pronounce that because it's one of the names of Hashem. And then he says to him, he continues and he says, Zeh shmi le'olam, that's my name forever. V'zeh zichri ledor dor, that's how you remember me forever. What is going on? Now let's put on our thinking caps. We're going to learn a little bit deep now. Ready? What does it mean? He says, I'm going to come to Bnei Israel, and I'm going to say, Hashem, your God of your fathers, is releasing you from Mitzrayim. What's their question going to be? What's his name? What's his name? That's the question. You know, some of the things Moshe says make sense. Moshe was arguing with us, and he says, Shlachna biyad tishlach. He says, just send whoever you're going to send Mashiach. Why do you want to make this suffering a suffering process, which means sending me, having a redemption from Mitzrayim, then whatever, and then takes another few thousand years, and then we're going to release them? Just bring Mashiach now. That makes sense. He says, Hashem, why would you send me? I'm the youngest brother. I have an older brother. His name is Aaron. That's humility. Those are some of the things Moshe says. But what does it mean that I'm going to come and they're going to say, what's his name? Why is that going to be the question? Think about it. If you were the Jews.
That's what they used to.
If you were the,
they worked in God. They worship God.
if you were the Jews, and Moshe comes over to you and he says, I'm ready to take you out of Mitzrayim. And he tells you, by the way, the name of Hashem. He says, those are the words. Hashem Elokei Avotechem Shlachani Alechem. I just told you who I am. Hashem, God of your fathers, is going to take you out. So Moshe says, I'm going to tell them Hashem, God of your fathers, is ready to take you out. Ve'amruli mashmo.
So slave mentality.
But first, I just told you my name. I said Hashem Elokei Avotechem. That's my name, Hashem.
Where was he till now? Maybe.
So if they say, where was he till now?
Holocaust.
That makes sense. How's that expressed in the words mashmo? What's his name? They might say that, right? Where was he till now? That's a good question. Why is the question of what's his name that? And then he says, I'm going to say, Eke asher eke, I'll be who I'll be. What did you just answer there? Says Rashi, Eyeh imam betzara hazot. Eyeh imam, I will be with them now, and I'll be with them in following exiles that they get out to. Whatever tsaras, whatever challenges and problems you have, I'm with you. That's what Hashem answers. He says,
That's what she asked.
I am here
Like
with you.
She was saying the question, where was he? So this is the answer. Maybe
Yes. But we want to understand, why is the question of mashmo? Then Rashi says, Hashem continues, he's like, Zesh mi le'olam. So Rashi says the word le'olam is spelled without a vav. Le'olam should be ayin vav. Le'alem. Maza le'alem? Hashem says, I'm concealed. Why am I concealed? Because you're not allowed to pronounce my name. Right? You spell it Yud K Vav K, but the spelling you're not allowed to say. You can't pronounce with the actual spelling of Yud K Vav K. What do we say? We say a different word entirely.
Say Hashem.
Adonai, Hashem. We use the word Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. So we basically do not say the letters nor the actual vowels. Right?
If I may, Moshe grew up in the palace of Pa'or. And we know that he was part of the family for a long time. He's appearing now to the Jews, if we think out of the box. He's appearing to the Jews, to the Israelites, and perhaps, I'm not sure exactly what clothing he was wearing. And when they asked him Mashmo, perhaps the Egyptians had lots of gods. They perhaps wanted to know exactly, where are you coming from, Moshe, that you're telling us, Elokei Avotechem, he didn't say Avotenu, he said Avotechem, Shlachani Alechem.
Right.
Who are you? Are you a real Egyptian? Are you a real Israelite? So perhaps they really wanted to find out.
Right.
Mashmo
And what's the answer?
Kadosh Baruch Hu.
And what's the answer?
The
Eke
answer
asher
is-
eke.
Okay, eventually it was Pakot Pakaliti, but at this point
Right.
it's Eke Asher Eke.
Somehow, what we want to do is make this, understand this. Step one is, he says, Hashem Elokei Avotechem Shlachani Alechem. So their question's going to be, what's his name?
Right.
So he says, and by the way, Hashem, that's my question too. Ve'amruli mashmo, I have the same question. Ma omar aleim. So Hashem says, Eke asher eke. As Rashi says, I'm going to be with you. I'm with you in this problem. I'm with you in the next one.
We see it often in Torah where for example, this week's parsha, it says that Yosef was king, but we already knew he's king. Why was it mentioned again? It was the same. He was the same Yosef who was also a shepherd who
Right.
now is the king. So you see it a lot of times where the Torah gives us the repetition of a name of a place or a king, and it's to teach us something more than just the name.
Right. So what's it teaching us here?
That he's going to be with them forever in the good times
Okay.
and the bad times.
And then he continues, and he says, I want to add to you, so you really get it. This is my name, le'alem, which means you can't pronounce my name. I'm giving you my name, but you have to conceal it. You're not allowed to pronounce my name. And then he continues, v'zezichri ledor dor. And this is how you remember me, which means you're supposed to mention me. Don't think because you can't say my name the way it's supposed to be said that you can't say my name. You could say my name, but you can't mention me, right? Which means zeshmi le'olam is you're not allowed to say the name of Hashem as it is, but don't not mention me as a result. Keep on saying it. Zezichri ledor dor. That's what Rashi says. Now, whatever this means, it has to have a meaning for us now, because we read these stories in our lives today. The story is not just a story of the Jews in Egypt many thousands of years ago. It's the story of you and I now, because Torah is hora'ah, an instruction and a lesson in life. It's not a story, it's something for you and I now. So I want to share with you an interpretation that was explained by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1983. In Teves of 1983. That's now 40 years ago. And it's interesting because I always think about it. Achrei 40 shana ka'im inish adata derabe, it says. After 40 years, you begin to understand what your Rebbe was saying always. It takes 40 years for him to internalize the idea and the message. And he explained, he went through a whole lengthy discussion about the Rashi and analyzing deep, like the questions on Rashi. I'm going to just cut the chase and give you the life force of the idea, the soul of the idea. He says, what's the question that every one of us asks? Think about it, not the Jews there, think about you and me today. So let's take one type of question. The first question is, the Holocaust, that's a big one. Whenever you think about Hashem, you're like, Hashem, you're amazing, you're awesome. But what were you thinking about when the Holocaust was happening? Like, just want to let me in on some... Where were you in the Holocaust? And in case you think one Holocaust, we've got a lot of them. That's just a big one. So we just really don't get Hashem. Like, what are you thinking? Meaning, because I'm a believing Jew, so I know that Hashem, you're in control, you're in charge of everything, you make decisions, you decide. So why do you let these things happen, Hashem? And then you say, I'm going to bring Mashiach. What? Like, one day you wake up, okay, let's bring him now. Why all the suffering till now if you were just able to press the override button? Aren't you God? Aren't you big and huge and all powerful? Don't we relate to you as almighty? So why do we have to suffer? Isn't that a question we all have? What's up with you, Hashem? What are you thinking about? See, because we ascribe power to Hashem. We know Hashem has the power, so why don't you activate your power?
Because we try to limit him. That's true.
Limit him in what sense?
Limit
him to being unlimited.
to be like how we would think.
Right.
But
In other words, we limit.
is
Yes.
tapping in.
Exactly.
If you tap into yourself and that part of you that has Hashem in it,
Mm-hmm.
there's no limit. Like,
We limit Hashem.
That's true.
Listen to the problem. We limit Hashem to being unlimited, all powerful. So what are you doing?
Limiting.
Meaning, of course you could do something. I mean, you can't do something? You can't save us? So why are you God then? Of course you could save us. So why don't you? It's like a human grappling. What's up with you, God? But let's not go so intense about Holocaust. Let's just look at like simple life, which you and I go through. How many times do you believe? Think about it. Do you feel you have a special relationship? You. Special for you. Relationship with Hashem. And you say to Hashem, look Hashem, me and you, we're connected. So just do this for me, just get this thing done and, you know, like that. I want to just take away the suffering for me and the struggle. I don't want to struggle, right? So it's like, okay, I'm going to daven for you, just get me that shidduch. Just get me the money that I need, just get me this answer, and then I'll keep on davening, I'll be fine or whatever, right? we believe we have a special relationship with Hashem. You do have a special relationship. But then you sometimes think to yourself that why doesn't Hashem activate the special relationship? Why does he make me work so hard? And it's like, Hashem, press the override button. Moshe says, what I'm anticipating is, I'm going to come to the Jews, I'm going to say to them, Hashem, Elokei avotechem shlachani alechem. Hashem sent me to you. What's going to be their question? Mashmo. What is a name? A name is an expression of who you are. Your name is not you. Your name just describes you. Your name is a way for other people to hold on to you, right? That's what your name is. So he says, a name is Hashem's. Hashem is unlimited. The name is how he reveals himself to us. So he says, I'm going to come to Bnei Yisrael, to the Jewish people, and I'm going to say to them, Hashem, God of your father, sent me to you. So they will say, Mashmo. Like, how does he operate? What does he think about? What does he want from us? How are we supposed to relate to him? Meaning, I could say, okay, Hashem's being compassionate now. So he wants me to daven to him and to ask him. Or I could say, maybe Hashem is being like angry now at the Egyptians. So I've got to relate to him in that way. Maybe he's being kind to us. Which emotion is he utilizing now? And Moshe says, I have the same question about you, Hashem. I don't understand you. The part I don't understand is, what name prompts you today to release the Jews? There were thousands upon thousands, at least, of Jewish babies who were murdered mercilessly. Because Paroi, right, when he didn't have, he had tsaras, he got some kind of sickness. So when he got it, they told him, you need blood, Jewish blood. And he murdered Jewish babies to bathe in their blood. That's what happened. He had the babies thrown into the River Nile. And then he had another one when he couldn't finish the bricks and he didn't finish building the wall. What did Pare do? He was able to complete the building with Jewish babies. How much suffering had the Jewish people endured till now? 210 years, of which the last 86 years were back-breaking labor. Think about it. How long was the Holocaust? Holocaust was a disaster. 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever you're going to say. But this was 86 years of a total of 210 years. That's enough to drive anyone generations of absolute insanity. And now Hashem comes and he says, Moshe, I'm freeing you. I'm taking you out. So they're like, Mashmo, who's this God that suddenly one day now, yes, and then no? What's he thinking? And that's a question which we all have in our simple lives, not just the Holocaust question. It's like, okay, Mashiach didn't come in the Holocaust, but he's going to come now. He didn't come in the Holocaust. Even in Corona, we were convinced he's coming. Yeah. The Holocaust, he didn't come. So now he's going to come? And then when he comes, like, okay, I'm coming. You're like, but what's his name? How does this work? When do you make decisions on how you're going to operate? And in our lives, we ask that question. Hashem, I don't understand you. One day, you do things for me. I feel like Hashem is just with me. It's so beautiful. And then I'm suffering. And I'm really struggling, God. I'm having a difficult time. What is your modus operandi? And Hashem's answer is so critical for our health and well-being. He says, firstly, what I want to say to you is, Eke asher eke, which means, contrary to what you think, that I'm almighty, all-powerful, can do anything, don't box me into what human beings decide to box Hashem. I am not almighty, and meaning I'm walking in and I'm like, you're suffering, and I'm almighty. When you suffer, I suffer. Imo anochi betzara. It's like when you're a mommy and your child is suffering and struggling, you suffer too. I won't forget that moment. I was just freshly married, and then suddenly there was another member of the family, which was very nice. And then we found out that she had a murmur in her heart, which at the time was supposed to be like a big problem. I don't know. It was nothing. But anyway, And we went to the doctor and they put her under for like, because she was too small, so they were testing her or whatever. And I just remember that first moment, I was like a young bacher, you know, and I'm holding this little baby. And then she was like staring at me, and I noticed she's looking at me, and she's like a little small baby and so helpless. And I saw that, I was like, it's all okay, it's just small little procedure and it's fine and it's nothing and don't worry about it. But she was crying. And I was like, my heart like suddenly went with her. And I was mamish feeling all her pain. And I was struggling with her. Even though she didn't know what's happening next. To her, this was a life-changing experience. To me, it wasn't. I knew what was going to happen. And I suffered with her nonetheless. I was like crying with her. Think about Hashem as your parent doing the same thing with you. The problem we have with Hashem is we make him into an almighty being up there. So we look at God as, you can do anything, so why don't you? And Hashem says, listen here, I can do anything. I can even do something that you can't understand. This is crazy. It's insane. I am vulnerable too. And you're like, no, you're not. Because if you're vulnerable, then what am I going to do now? And he says, no, I'm both.
Wow.
I'm almighty, that's why I'm God. You can't understand this part. I'm Hashem. And I'm vulnerable. When you struggle, I struggle. When Jewish babies get thrown into the River Nile, and when they get stuck between buildings, and when they get bathed in their blood, I suffer too. I am in that sorrow with you. I'm struggling, I'm crying with you. And it's not that I'm crying, I'm able to do something. I can't. And I'm struggling with you. So if you can't, you're not God, you're also, no, I'm still God. I'm still up there, I can do anything. But I'm still struggling with you. And we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he says, here's why I'm telling you this. Ehyeh imahem betzara hazot. You want to feel that Hashem is with you in this tzara. Look at whatever you're going through and appreciate and understand that Hashem is with you. I'm not explaining to you philosophy over here. I can't. Zeh shmi le'olam, Hashem adds. What's zeh shmi le'olam? You can't pronounce my name the way it is. That means nobody is able to actually, what does it mean? I could just read the word if I wanted to. Yeah, but you'll never get it. You'll never be able to take Hashem as he is removed and bring him down that same way. That means Hashem's name cannot be read and explained the way he is. What Hashem is removed. I'm almighty, all powerful, and all vulnerable to you. And I'm actually suffering and struggling with you when you struggle. And the reason I'm telling you that is not because you will understand it. It's because I'm telling you what to do when you're struggling. I'm giving you an answer to your struggle. Zeh shmi le'olam. My name is, as Rashi says, leha'alim. I'm hidden. This is not something you can grasp. But what you need to know is, zeh zichri le'dor dor. Keep on mentioning Hashem's name. How do you do it? You can try this out. In 1 second. You can try this out and you can see how it actually works. We're not only talking about a cosmic geula. Geula, of course, is how we get to redemption. But try this out on a daily basis when you want to experience redemption. Take a look at yourself when you're struggling, when you're in a space of deep internal difficulty, when you're feeling in pain. And take a look at yourself where pain comes about. It happens like this mother and daughter were telling about an argument they had. So the mother was asking the daughter to help her. And she brought her kids over. And when she came with the kids over, she comes inside the house and then they were messed up the whole house. And the mother says, you just clean up after them. And so the daughter says, what? You told me to clean and to whatever, what am I stomach? Well, okay, that's it. I'm not coming anymore. So she's like, you're not coming anymore? Who are you coming for, me or for you? Don't come. And I was listening to this thing and they had an argument. and a fight. And then like, she wants her to come, and she doesn't want to not come. They both want, but they had a fight. It's because we sometimes don't know how to fight, how to argue. Don't argue. When you're feeling the pain, and you feel someone's challenging you, and you're like, she's like, why don't you clean up? Get alone with yourself and ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? Before you respond. How am I feeling right now? What you'll discover is, the reason we respond is, I'm feeling hurt. So basically, I get what you're saying, but I'm feeling accused. I'm feeling humiliated. Before you respond, identify how you feel. Crystallize how you feel. Switch to the mother. What are you feeling when your daughter's not helping you? You're feeling abused. I feel disrespected. Don't scream at her before you identify what you feel. You're just going to intensify the problem. If the mother would sit there and say, I'm really feeling disrespected. And maybe she could even say to the daughter, you know, when your kids don't clean up, I really feel disrespected.
That's called active listening.
Active listening. Thank you. And what's going to be the response? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't want to make you feel disrespected. Or the daughter would say, when you scream at me like that, I feel humiliated. It makes me feel like I'm always a little child. Don't say I'm just feeling hurt. When people understand what they are and get active listening to yourself, how do I feel? When you get how you feel, you identify what you feel, now you are poised to bring Hashem into the picture. Now you say, okay, I'm feeling very disrespected right now. And Hashem says, I'm with you in this disrespect. I'm with you here. When you don't identify how you feel, you keep on trying to solve the problem. So you're feeling disrespected, so what are you doing? You're screaming at her, and she's screaming back, and there's an argument and a fight going on, and no one's ever solving the problem. But if you actually identified what's going on, and you identify the feeling what you have for yourself, and then you say, Hashem, I'm a Maimin. I'm a believer in Hashem. I have emunah. And so I'm going to download the emunah into this moment. And think about what Hashem says. I'm here with you. Stop thinking about Hashem as almighty and all-powerful. Think about Hashem as your parent who's there and he's hugging you. And he says, I feel your pain right now. I feel that you feel this disrespect. I feel you feel the humiliation and you feel the hurt. And I'm with you right here. So Moshe asks Hashem, Ve'amru li ma shmo. They will say, how do we make Hashem real to us? What are we supposed to do to bring Hashem down? Ma ma'alem. I don't know how to do this. That's what we all ask. We say, Ani ma'amin. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shlema that there's a God. I believe there's Mashiach. I believe Chesed Mesim. I believe all these wonderful things. I don't know what to do about it. How do I change my life? By downloading emunah into this moment now. And what's the answer? The answer is, Eyei ma'em betzara hazot. Hashem is with you in this tzara. Stop thinking of God as up there and almighty. Think of Hashem as your power in your life now. And that's what changes it. And then you say, but Hashem, you're not really feeling my pain because you're really above and you're not with me. And he says, listen, Zeshmi le'olam. I'm hidden. I'm concealed. There's no way I can explain this to you. But stop trying to press the override button all the time. And saying to Hashem, Hashem, just take care of it, just make it fine. I went to this class and we were learning about how you're supposed to feel the feeling and appreciate it. And then afterwards you're supposed to feel Hashem there, okay, I get it, but that's for everybody else. For me, just Hashem, make it, there shouldn't be an argument over here and a fight. And Hashem says, Zeshmi le'olam. This is the way it is. I'm hidden, I'm concealed. Zezichri le'dor dor. Every single generation, every single moment, every single person needs to find Hashem and to remind Hashem and to bring him into this moment. So when Hashem comes to you in suffering and he says to Moshe, what's going on, Moshe? I don't understand. I don't get who Hashem is. And Hashem is downloading emunah into you. He's drawing the emunah down and he's saying, there's an internal belief. It's so hard and so difficult to have emunah, because emunah is not a theory. Emunah means to bring it down into this present moment, right here, into this life as it is now. And so they tell the story. There were two tailors, and these tailors were Hasidim. They were good people. They were, pious Jews. But one day they started to make money because they became tailors. Hashem helped them. They became tailors for the powerful people. And so they started to make them for Gentiles. And so slowly they started going out to their homes, and they had to measure them, and they got conversation with them. Today we don't understand what it means to be really sheltered. The Jews lived in ghettos, and they weren't allowed to live in most big cities. They just couldn't be there. So they were very locked up. So the tailors are there, and they get too close. So one day they start changing their clothing, and they started changing the way they ate. They started to eat at the parties, and they started to enjoy, and slowly but surely they dropped a lot of stuff. So they still looked Jewish for some reason. Somehow, the Rebbe Rayatz once told a guy, he says, I can see you're a Jew because when you don't look Jewish, but I can see you're Jewish. He says, how do I know? Because sometimes the moil, when he does the bris, so he takes the orla, the foreskin off, and he puts it on your nose. It's like your Jewish nose. And I can tell it. He says, sometimes, even when you try to find, you're still Jewish. So these two tailors, they're traveling on one of their trips, and they stop over at a small village. And when they get to this village, they knock on a door because there's no real hotels. So they're looking for a place to stay. So they knock on someone's door and they ask him, we'll pay you to stay. They say, sure. Guy listens to them, brings them in. It's a small little village, middle of nowhere. It's called Piena. And they come into his home, and he says, I see you guys are Jewish, so I'm so sorry about it. I know you keep kosher, and I can't really offer you too much food, but I'll give you some, fruits and vegetables, uncut apples, bananas. I'll give you something to eat, but I can't give you real meal because I don't have kosher food. They said to him, don't worry about it. We don't keep kosher. It's fine. You can give us whatever you want. He's like, oh, that's great. Okay. So he takes them into their room, and he shows them, okay, this is your room. And he says, make yourself comfortable. And, he comes back afterwards with a meal. And he goes to make the meal. And comes after a while, knocks on the door. They open the door. Comes in with his son, I think it was. And he's holding a massive axe in his hand. And he says, okay, just to let you know, you've just reached the home of a big, I'm in charge of all the gun of them in this area. We're highway robbery. We're the guys, and I'm the guy in charge. And so what I do to people is when they come to my house to knock on the door, I kill them. And I take away all their possessions. And there's no trace. And it's fine. We're in Russia, so nobody knows anything anyway. So he says, so I'm going to kill you now. Hope it's okay. And then they're like begging, please don't. They're crying and whatever. And he says to them, listen, I'm a good guy. So one thing I'll agree to is, I'm going to tie you up for the night. This kid goes and ties them up. He says, I'm going to give you a few hours to pray. It's night now. In the morning, at the crack of dawn, I'll be in here and I'll kill you. But you can daven all night long. So that's good. Then he locks the door and leaves them inside this room. And there's nowhere to run. And all night long, they're tied up. And they're praying and praying and praying and praying and praying all night long. And in the morning, he comes in, he opens up the door. And he comes in, jovial. Hey guys, wake up. Yeah, takes them out, opens their things. And he says, would you like to eat something? They're like, what's up? You're not killing us? He said, no, I was just joking. So they're like, what does this mean? He says, years ago, in my house over here, a holy man stayed here. And this man, he told me, he passed away in my house. He was here for the last few weeks of his life. He passed away here on Motzei Shabbat Kodesh Parashat Shemot, the 24th of Teves, Tavkuf Ayin Gimel. He passed away in my home. And shortly before he passed away, he asked me that if ever any Jews come to my house and they are not keeping their Judaism, that I should frighten them a little bit until they get to a realization and to appreciate their being Jewish. So he says, I never had the opportunity till now. No Jews really passed by here. This is the first time some Jews came by, and you guys came by, and I almost forgot about the whole thing. But then you came by, and I knew kosher food because he was staying in my house. I knew exactly what kosher food was. And then you guys said you want to eat non-kosher food, so I realized that's my opportunity. So I was like, what should I do? So I figured the axe would do the trick. He says, and I noticed that all night long you were praying. I noticed that Jews, when you put them into a corner and you're about to kill them, suddenly the emunah comes jumping out. Suddenly they do teshuvah and they come back and suddenly they believe in Hashem. The way he puts it in haTanya is, when a person's in the last moments of his life, if you get told that, everything else falls away. You know the truth now, and you live that truth. It's like every other nonsensical approach to life falls away, and the emunah comes shining through. I wanted to give you a little bit of a gift. The room you stayed in was the room that the Baal haTanya stayed in. And I figured the walls seeped with teshuvah, with emunah, with a coming back to Hashem. And I'm hoping that his message that he wanted to send to you was that you'll realize that it's not just about when someone wants to kill you that you die for the cause, but you realize emunah is real. The same way as you have a real connection to God. When you're in that position, you should feel emunah every moment of your living life. And that's the work that we have. We stepped into, for a moment now, into the Baal haTanya's room. Not the physical room, but the spiritual room. And the room is a room of emunah. Emunah is that Hashem is real. And what does it mean Hashem is real? Stop making God into abstract being, into someone who's up there and almighty. Because you're saying almighty, but by saying that, you're saying, oh, and Hashem is not suffering with me. So Hashem, just take away the problem. And Hashem says, here's how I work. The way I work is when you say, Mashmo, Ma'o Ma'alei, what should I say? Tell them that every moment of your life, Hashem is with you. And the work you have in life is to discover Hashem, to feel, to identify what it is that you need Hashem for, and then you find Hashem in that moment, and you draw Hashem's presence right there, right here where you are. Because inside, we all have emunah. We just don't know how to live with it sometimes. And I can't explain this to you. There's no way to explain why this is. That's why I'm God. Zeh Shmi Le'olam. You can't pronounce me the way I am. You can't express me. You can't know the truth. What you could know is that you have the power in every generation, every moment of your life. Don't try to press the override button. You dive into Hashem and you ask Him, Hashem, I need this problem taken care of. And then you feel the problem taken care of. You feel how Hashem is with you. It's not asking God and crying and asking Hashem to help you. It's crying to Hashem and then feeling His presence in your life now. It's to mention Hashem's power and to realize His presence with you right now. It's very, very, very difficult. But when you do this, you'll discover Geula. You'll discover that it takes redemption. Even Moshe was arguing with Hashem for 7 days because he just couldn't get it. So what does this mean? How do you operate Hashem? But each one of us gets it at the end. That when we download Hashem's power into our lives, you'll see Geula, you'll see redemption, you'll see a whole different world.
Wow.